Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what is your identity, figuring out your identity with deliberate choices. So do you know who you are? I mean, really, what is your identity? As we get older and older in life, it is critical that we understand who we are and how we fit into the overall society. This not only makes us more confident, but it also helps us to attain our life's goals. And it also helps us to navigate morally difficult choices in our lives as well. When we know our identity and who we are, we have the ability to be clear on what we want out of life and not get bogged down in self-doubt. Figuring out who we are and what we represent isn't easy. It requires a lot of self-introspection. But I truly believe that in the long run, it's ultimately worth it. I went through the same journey in my 20s to understand what my identity was, and it ultimately helped me become a more confident person. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about what's an identity, why is it important to have one, and my tips and suggestions on how to craft your own identity. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. So let's first talk about some of the background on what is an identity. Identity, very simply, is who you are in relations to the people around you in society. It is defined mostly by you and how you grew up in society. But ultimately, you have the chance to craft your own identity as you will. It is in large part who you should be, the kind of life you want to live, and also the things you want to value the most. It is not a fixed thing. It can grow and change as you get older in life and experiences new things, and how you react to those experiences changes your identity. For example, quarter and midlife crises are one example of events that can change your identity. Those are some of the examples when you're forced to reevaluate your identities based on what's been going on in your life. Identity, when it comes down to it, is how we perceive ourselves and how others define us. So now let's talk about why it's so important to have an identity. Number one, align with your life's goals. When you have an identity, it's much easier to accomplish whatever goals you have set in your life. Long-term goals are very time-intensive and difficult to complete and requires a lot of energy. When you know who you are, you're less distracted over a long period of time and you can focus on your life goals. For example, if your identity is in engineering, then you focus all your time on STEM fields and things related to engineering. If you want to be an astronaut, then you focus all your time and energy on getting into the NASA Corps of Astronauts. When we know who we are, we get less distracted by other things that come up in life, and it helps us to refine and focus in on what truly matters to us. For me, when I realized that I was good at something, or people told me I was good at something, I would just start to focus on those things that I was good at. And over a long period of time, that really helped me to hone in on my identity and who I was. It was a mix of what I liked and what I was good at, and also what people told me that I was good at. As I started to hone in and understand who I was, it was a lot easier for me to complete my goals. So by understanding your identity, it's much easier to complete your long-term goals. You know who you are and what you need to do. There's less self-doubt. Number two, confidence is king. When you understand your identity, you can reduce or mitigate the self-doubt within yourself. When you make choices about who you are and what you want to become, you align with stereotypes and archetypes of your society. To put it simply, you know your place in society and you know the rules to follow. And in addition, having that strong identity in who you are and what you want to become, you also find similar people that have that same type of identity as you. So befriending them and joining communities can be easier as a result of that. Without a strong identity, we might be easily swayed by different choices and situations in our lives. And we would have more difficulty in understanding what is really right for me and what is really not good for me. Because with a strong identity, you form a solid base of which to build your confidence from. Number three, moral choices are easier to make. When you know who you are, making morally difficult choices are much easier for you. For example, if a person in front of you drops a wallet, do you take the money or do you give it back to that person? A good person would give that wallet back, a bad person would take the money and run. But what if you don't know if you're good or bad? How do you decide on which path to take? You might stop yourself before taking any action, you might question yourself a lot, and you might not know whether or not to do the good or bad action. For the wallet example, it's pretty straightforward, good or bad. But what if the situation is more complicated than that? When we have an identity and we're aligned with that, we act in accordance to that, and the choices we make reflect that. Without one, we'll struggle to make a decision, and worse, we might not make a decision at all. In this case, life may dictate the choices to us, and we might not be in control of our own life. When we know who we are, we can make moral choices that aligns with our identity, and it will be much easier for us to make that choice in the first place. So now let's talk about some of my tips on figuring out your identity. Number 1, past is prologue. Who were you in the past, and are you that same person now? When we look at ourselves in the past, we get a glimpse of what our identity was. And it could be the basis of what we form our current identity on. As humans, we don't usually change our identity a whole lot. We usually grow very slowly over a long period of time. So looking at the past is really a good example of who you currently are. So make a list of things of all the things that you value, things that you find fun, or just things that you like to do. This really helps you get a feel of what kind of things you like and what kind of person you are currently. By looking at these activities and things you like to do in the past, it can help you create who you are in the present time. And when you're looking at the past, think about things that you don't like about yourself and things that you regret, and write those down. The past is a good way to figure out who you were and core values you aligned with. Number 2, define your ideal self. Who are you? Are you a hero, a villain, a princess, or a rebel? Or something else? When you think about your ideal self, give a vision of who you want to become. This is important because it informs you of what you want to prioritize and work on in the near term. Identities are really malleable. If you are sure of who you want to become, nothing can stop you from being that person. The key in this case is to figure out how much of your current self aligns with those you idolize and want to become. Number 3, critical self-assessment. If you really want to understand who you are and what your identity is, you have to do a deep dive on yourself. This is different than looking into your past or your potential future. This is looking at your current self and really understanding what you believe in and what your core values are. You can usually go about this by asking deep dive questions about yourself and your core beliefs. They can be big questions like, am I a good person? Or they can be questions like, do I really care about what people think of me? The goal of this is to get a list of your core values and assess your strengths and weaknesses. And asking yourself the question, do you really align with who you really are or who you thought you were? So doing a critical assessment on yourself is an excellent way to figuring out your identity. Number 4, ask trusted people. Asking others can be a quick and easy way to figuring out what your identity is. Other people can observe you over a long period of time, and if you ask them, they can probably give you a good idea of what your identity is. And they can give you a good idea of who you think you are. Although I will have to caution that not everybody will have objective opinions on who you are. So you really have to trust the person that they really understand who you are and not telling you some BS about who they think you are. When you ask others about yourself, you can possibly uncover different blind spots that you wouldn't have if you did a deep dive on yourself. And they might be able to inform you on what you need to do to form your identity of choice. For me, I've learned the most when I ask others about who I am. Just because I think I have an established identity, I might not be actually acting in accordance with that identity. Because sometimes you have an idealized version of your identity and you think you're meeting that, but in reality, when people are looking at you, you might not be able to meet that. So asking others about yourself is a critical step in figuring out your own identity in relations to others. Number 5, judge not thyself. When you find out more about who you are and what your identity is, a big part of it is to not judge yourself on what you find. When you're trying to find your identity and you do deep dives and critical assessments on yourself, you're not always going to like what you find. Acceptance is a key. Acknowledge that you were or are this way and move on from it. When you find a part of your identity that you don't like, move on from it, grow from it. But don't get mired down and beat yourself up for it. Refocus and think about whether or not you want to change that aspect of yourself rather than criticize or tear yourself down for it. When I first went through this exercise myself, I thought I was a paragon. I thought that I was a good person and that I was always a good person. There are things in my life that I did that I couldn't claim that I was a good person for it. So I really had to accept and acknowledge that I did those things and move on from it. That I was going to craft my identity and work towards a better self. So when you do find aspects of your previous identity that you don't like, try to accept it and move on from it. Don't beat yourself up and criticize it. Have the faith and the strength that you'll craft a better identity going forward in the future. So those are some of my tips on figuring out your own identity. It is really important for our lives to know who we are and what we really stand for in life. It can help us navigate not only our personal lives, but the lives of those around us. A strong identity is really helpful in accomplishing our life's goals, staying confident, and making the morally ambiguous choices easier. It took me a really long time to form my identity and understand who I was. I took multiple deep dives on myself, and it didn't happen overnight. It was a period of many years. But because I was able to understand my identity, I'm much happier and confident as a result. I know what my stereotypes and archetypes are, and how I fit into society. The key to figuring out your identity is really to do a self-assessment on who you are, past, present, and future. And then going through the process of whether or not you want to change it or accept who you are and go from that. And making sure along the way that you don't judge yourself too harshly on what you find in the past. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on whether or not you know your identity and whether or not you want to change that. And I'll see you next time.